There we are. Okay. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا مولانا حبيب إله العالمين أبو القاسم المصطفى محمد وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين ولعنة الله على القوم الظالمين من الآن إلى يوم الدين. كتير إن شاء الله. Assalamu alaikum to everyone. Welcome to the Nahjal Balagha book club, the main group. I'm looking at the names now and seeing, okay, lots of regulars, alhamdulillah. Alaikum salam. Lots of regulars and also some new people. So it's really great to have you, alhamdulillah. And for those of you who are following on Facebook Live, you are so welcome to the book club, inshallah. And you can comment any thoughts you like and one of the admins will read it. But to those who are in this call, Assalamu alaikum to all of you. Thank you so much for joining. And let us dive right back into Nahjal Balagha in the way that we've been studying it over the last couple of weeks. You know, I checked that this is probably like week 4, I think, so nearly halfway. And it really has been a pleasure, alhamdulillah, doing the book club. Now then, to the matter at hand. We have been looking at the most sublime document which is famous from Nahjal Balagha with regards to its views of governance and its views of politics. And that is letter 53 of the Imam to Malik al-Ashtar. Now, last week, we gave ourselves a very good foundation. And alhamdulillah, there was so much great feedback, and I really appreciated some of the points that people made. And we said, okay, let's keep reading it, because it seems like there are more gems to be had in this in this speech, in this letter. And we didn't actually finish when going through the chronology. So we got to the beginning, we understood the Imam's introduction of adl and justice and qist, and how there's a plan from Allah to establish justice on this earth, and how the Imam is the one who continues that task. And that's what the Imam says, that Malik, I'm sending you to a place where people have not been used to qist. They're not used to adl. So you have to represent me in your hukum, because you represent me and I am representing Allah on this earth, and all of us are bound by the same hukum, which is of Allah. So Malik, here's your advice. When you go, act like this. This is your conduct. This is how your behavior should be. And the place that we actually came to pause on was by looking at some views of Shahid Mutahari, if you recall, in which Ayat al-Mutahari, commenting on this letter, says that the adl of Ali bin Abi Talib is different to the adl in the community at the time, because Islam has come to reorient the value systems of the community. Whereas before they regard some things as right and wrong, the religion of Islam comes to remind you and to recalibrate what is the communal sense of right and wrong. What is husn and qub for the qawm, for the entire community. And it seems like adl should be the basic framework of every community. It should be acting according to justice. Everyone having their rights. In fact, if you guys remember, there was a hadith in which the Imam was asked, what is greater, generosity or justice? And he says, justice is to put everything in its right, correct place, whereas generosity is to go even further. Right? So he mentioned that definition. Like we are a big fan of justice as followers of Ali bin Abi Talib. But the letter continues. In the letter, in addition to adl as a concept, we look at examples. 7 examples from the qawm, from the society that exists, in which Imam alayhi salam designates, Ya Malik, what are the huquq of each of these 7 members? The army, the chief judge, the executive officers, the clerical establishments, the business people, those who are miskeen, there was another group as well. And by designating each of them, we understand what does the ideal government of Imam Ali look like. Because using this letter is such a good constitution to have, because we don't have many documents of political nature from Ahlul Bayt in terms of documents. We have, for example, the Constitution of Medina, which the Holy Prophet established when after he did his hijrah. We have this one. We have Risalatul Huquq of Imam Sajjad, and we have others. But we today, in understanding our political rights, need to use everything that we can get. And that is what we are presented with in the form of this letter. Okay, so before we begin, just so I can double check, are the people in the group right now, just so I can see, do you guys have the letter in front of you at the moment? Do you need him to send the link? Do you have the letter open? Let me know if you want me to write it or if you want me to put it in the group. You can maybe you can raise your hand just to let me know that you've got it in front of you, just so I know. If anyone needs it, you can write in the chat or just unmute and let me know if you want me to write it. Yeah, I'll do it anyway, just in case. Okay, thank you for raising your hands. For those who've not, I'll just put it in the group, and alongside it you can, inshallah, thank you, inshallah, you can follow along. Ya Allah. There it is. So those of you who've not got it, this is a good way to follow. And there are obviously many different versions of Nahjal Balagha with different translations, but this one is a good one that we are following. Okay. Okay then. So in the sermon, we continue. The Imam is speaking about Adl, and he says to Malik that there are 7 types of classes, we are told, of people. And we would like, Malik, you have to pay attention to them. Okay. If someone is not muted, please mute yourself unless there's something that you'd like to say. Okay. Okay, before we get there, there's one part of the sermon which we didn't go through last time before that point, which is when Imam Ali says to Malik, don't try and compete with Allah. Okay, he says to him that you have no power before Allah, your quwwah is nothing compared to that of your Lord, and so remember that. And repent and be forgiving in punishment, because that punishment is not from you, it's from Allah. And in fact, before he introduces the types of communities to do adl for, he reminds Malik of a very important principle, which is this. Ya Malik, he says, Ansif Allahu wansif nas. Do justice for Allah and do justice for the people. This is the priority. And many of you have heard this phrase of haqqullah and haqqun nas. He says, start with insaf, with the rights of Allah. Wansif nas. Min anfusik, against yourself, even if it is against what you want, you have to apply this. وَمِنْ خَاصَّةِ الْأَحْلِكِ, and even against your near ones in your family, you must implement this insaf, this justice. وَمَنْ لَكَ فِيهِ حَوَانْ مِنْ رَعِيَّتِ, and even those who are your favorites amongst your rawiyya. So your rawiyya are those people who are your subjects, even those who are your favorites. Don't change insaf just because they're close to you. Why? He explains, he explains, فَإِنَّكَ إِلَّا تَفْعَلْ تُظْلِمْ, because then you'll be doing a dhulm to them the moment you start giving them more or less than their rights. Because we said last time, adl is giving everyone their correct rights. It doesn't just mean taking away someone's rights, it means giving them more than their huquq allow at the cost of somebody else. So the examples here are, anfusikum, for yourself, don't give yourself more than you should. For your ahl, for your family, don't give them more just because they're your family. And of your favorite from your rawiyya, don't give them more positions and success just because they're close to you. And the people at the time have just been living under the Khilafah of Uthman. And during that time, it was very common for someone from Banu Umayyah, like Ziyad, to just be put in power in a place just because they're the family members of the Khalifa. It was so normal. Land was appropriated from people just by relatives or relatives of Banu Umayyah, just because they had that family, link. The Imam is saying you need to adapt insaf even against your own family, because justice is the priority. In fact, when Aqil, the brother of the Imam, comes to him asking for more money from Bayt al-Mal, when Ibn Abbas, the Imam's own relative, comes to him again asking for more, the Imam says to them that as the Imam, I can only act according to adl and insaf, not because you are my family and deserve some special treatment. He keeps going. وَمَنْ ظَلَمَ عِبَادَ اللَّهِ كَانَ اللَّهُ خَصْمَهُ دُونَ عِبَادِهِ. If someone tries to do dhulm in this way, they're doing dhulm against Allah, and Allah will become their opponent. وَمَنْ خَاصَمَهُ اللَّهِ, and if Allah becomes your opponent, أَدْخَسَ حُجَّتَهُ, He will start to trample your hujjah, your require, your wish, your hajjah. He will no longer listen to it because you become his opponent. وَكَانَ اللَّهُ حَرْبًا حَتَّى يَنْزَعَ وَيَتُوبُ. And Allah will have harb against you. He will accept war against the one who does insaf, who does not do insaf and claim to represent him. And so we now come to the priority. Malik, do insaf even when it is against what other people would want or would ask you. You have haqq of Allah. This is really important, just so we're clear. We have insaf Allah and insaf an-nas. Haqqullah, haqqun nas. The rights of God, the rights of man. We, in the school of Ahlul Bayt, believe that any of our activism, any of our politics, any of the rights we give to people, we don't generate it ourselves. It comes from the rights we owe Allah. And it's from the rights that we owe to Allah that we understand what our rights to one another. Easy example, wilaya. Wilaya, love for one another, is an abstraction from wilayat of Allah, from leadership of God. And from that wilaya, we get walaya amongst one another. But that's the priority. We all around us, we have people who are taking political stances of different religions and maybe our own religion. And if you trace that, where did you get your politics from? Sometimes their stances come from this thinker they liked, or that theory, or maybe the people around them who have the same view. And maybe the conclusion is sound, but the reasoning does not come from Allah. The Imam is saying, Malik, ansif Allah, wansif nas. You first do adl to Allah, and then do adl to the people. Like, that's where you get your adl from. This is a similar view to other philosophers. So Plato, who many of you may have heard, says that universal principle, one of them, is that all people should perform a function in their community according to their nature, which best suits them. And this we call justice. Imam Ali says what? Everything in its rightful place. Plato says what? Everyone in the community must find what is in their nature to do and perform it. And Plato then argued that if you mix different qualities together, like temperance, like courage, and like wisdom, these things combine to make adl. We have a different view. We say that whatever qualities we get, we obtain them from Allah. This is why in Sermon 141, Imam Ali says, وَاشْهَدُ أَنَّهُ عَدْلٌ عَدْلٌ. And I swear that Allah is adl and does adl. Not just that he follows justice like I follow justice. He is adl, he is justice, and he does justice. In the same way we say, in Allah Ta'ala Jamilun yuhibbul Jamal, Allah is beauty and he does beauty. We understand what beauty is from Allah. We understand what adl is from Allah. And please keep remembering this priority, because later on, when we look at politics, we're going to find that if we don't have this link between my stances and the adl of Allah, I could make a lot of mistakes in knowing right and wrong, especially when it comes to husn qub and right and wrong, because the stakes get really high. Okay, it's in our fitrah to want justice. It's in our nature to desire justice. And Imam Ali Islam gives us a description to help guide these inclinations. But the beginning is insaf Allah, and then insaf an-nas. All right. I want to go through the different types, but before I do, I want to quickly ask a question, which is based on what we've discussed so far. Has anyone got any comments on what is justice in general? What is adl? Any reflections reading this sermon? This letter, are there any thoughts, inshallah, anyone wants to share, or are we feeling positive in going forward? This is the chance now to raise your hand if you have a question or you'd like to mention a point. Rizwan Bhai, is your hand raised from now or from before?
From before.
No problem. Is anyone who wants to mention anything about adl, that you have any reflections you'd like to share, inshallah, with us?
Can I?
Yes, Assalamu alaikum, Agha.
Alaikum salam. Well, I remember a majlis from Maulana many years ago. He said that if we put a cap on our head, then we are doing adl with the cap. But if you put the cap on our foot, then we are doing zulm with the cap. So to put the right thing in the right place is adl.
Beautiful, beautiful example. I'm glad it stuck with you. MashaAllah, it was a great example from many years ago that has stayed. But you're right, every item has its own adl, has its own rights, its own huquq that we have to respect. Any other points on the mic?
I think Imam Ali
Alaikum salam.
actually wrote down the fundamentals of faith and religion. He said faith and religion is based on 4 characteristics:
Mm-hmm.
and the endurance, justice. I think there's jihad, and there's another one. So justice has multiple facets and 4 different ones. But for me personally, I think the main aspect of clear thinking of adl is the Quranic ayat, which says that do justice even if it's against yourself.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the hardest point of justice, where you have something which is you're yearning for a benefit in the world, and you're yearning to hide something secretive to prevent yourself from getting caught or blamed. But knowing you're the first person to say, yes, it was me who indebted, or it's me who needs this thing done to them, is justice in a nutshell. Because it's easy to give justice to another, but it's harder to give justice to oneself. And I think that's the crux, for me at least, what justice means. And Imam Ali does that quite nicely, in that if you don't just to yourself and to others in that regard, then you're not going to fulfill your criteria of being a leader. So that's my thoughts.
I agree with you 100%. Know the truth, and then you'll know its people. And like you're saying, like, you cannot know justice by who's doing it, because what if there's only one person who's acting righteously in a community? We can't use that as a judgment. So you're right. You have to apply it to yourself and even against yourself sometimes. This is a really good point, and that's why we're going to come to the conclusion today. A little spoiler and teaser before we get there. You need to do self-purification in order to claim to be an activist. And this is one of the reasons why I think, and I'm giving a talk on this on Friday, inshallah, with Al-Muntazir network, who actually in this call. But unless you understand yourself and have purified desires, like we said last week, those desires are going to get in the way of justice. It's going to happen. We've mentioned that that Allah is the one who saves us from shahawat. The moment we say Allah, that I'm going to be one who helps God, but there's a conflict between justice and myself, and I've got to work on myself for that. So that's a great point. I always see your name as Galaxy Phone, so I don't know your name, Agha, but thank you so much for that reflection.
I'm on my phone. Shazad, I've commented a few times.
Yeah, thank you, Agha Shazad. Thank you so much. There's a comment in the group. I'll mention that, and then I'll go back to the mic. Sister Shaban has said, putting everything in their rightful place, giving the right huquq to the right person. Good. So different people have different huquq. That's so interesting. It's not the case that insaf means treat everyone the same. That is not the case. As we're going to go through it, different groups need different treatment. And adl means firstly having ma'rifah of who deserves which rights and then issuing them. For example, the mustad'afin, the miskin, those who are weak, those who are poor, clearly they have a greater right to the public treasury than the one who is rich. But how does a government set up to recognize different rights? That's what we're going to come to. Before we move on, is anyone who'd like to mention a comment on the mic or on the chat before we continue about what your view of justice is in reading this letter?
Alaikum Abbas.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
Yeah, it reminds me of one saying of Imam Ali, that, a person, a Yahudi, he came and he asked Imam Ali that, can you describe Islam in 2 words? And he said that, hukukul ibad and hukukul nas. He said that whatever the right of Allah, you have to give to Allah, and whatever of the right of the person, of a people, you have to give it to them. That is what Islam is. So he has described so beautifully in 2 words, as he demanded, that Islam is nothing but jo Allah ka haq hai, wo Allah ko do, aur jo bandon ka haq hai, wo bandon ko do. That's what I would like to share.
Ahsan. To translate the last point, it was that whatever rights of Allah we give them, whatever rights of people we give them. Now remember, Rizwan Bhai, what's the priority? What comes first? Haqqullah and then haqqun nas, right? And that's the point. The point is that not only does one come first, the second comes from the first. So True. We only know haqqun nas because we knew haqqullah. Do you see?
True, yeah.
And the same thing is repeated here.
MashaAllah, yeah.
Alhamdulillah. I'm glad that point. Thank you for helping to make that point firm with another dalil. So thank you so much, Rizwan Bhai. Okay, that's a lot of great feedback, alhamdulillah. So what I'm going to do now, anyone want to sneak any last points in? Are we good? Okay, if you're bubbling with a point, you can always raise your hand and unmute. This is our book club, inshallah, and everyone is welcome to comment. But if not, let's dive in. So the Imam then goes through different classes of people. And by classes, what we mean specifically is, if there is going to be a government, O Malik, you need to give the rights of each segment of that government in the right way. In that government, we have, number one, the army. What are the rights of the army? And I'm going to go through them. And while going through them, bear in mind that the Imam is not just describing an army, he's describing what an ideal soldier is. And that's something all of us can take into our own personal development. What does a soldier of the Imam even look like? We can see that. Number two, the chief judge. So the hakim, but the main hakim, who's going to be issuing judgments and giving, the qadi. What should the way that the government treats the judge look like? Okay. Third, the executive officers. So these are the people who are essentially managing different departments and representing the government. What should their conduct be? How should they even be chosen in the first place? Fourth, those people who administer the revenue. So these are the people who are not only collecting tax, but interacting with the people in order to keep the financial life of the community going. How should they be treated? And how should anyone who's handling money for the religion be considered and act? Fifth, the clerical establishment, yani administration. How should people who are the front line of the government act? Because the normal people are not going to meet the judge and the khalifa and the army on normal days, but they are going to see normal clerics and administrative representatives. What should their conduct be? Inshallah, we'll go through that. Sixth, traders and business people. The Imam goes into detail of those who have shops, those who do physical labor, and those who travel for work. All of these people, he says, are the main sources of rizq in the community in terms of material rizq. But how should they be treated? That's number 6. And number 7, those who are miskeen, the lowest class, those who are in a state of poverty. What should be their huquq? I will now quickly summarize what the Imam mentions of each of these groups. And then open up for questions. Now, while I'm going through them, if you have any points, please feel free to raise your hand or unmute. But otherwise, I will go through them. Okay, first of all, the army. Now, in this time, the army, the Jaysh are obviously very important, mainly because they are engaged in active combat. And the Imam is saying that you need to choose the person who represents us in warfare in the right way. فوالله من جندك أنصحهم في نفسك الله ولرسوله ولإمامك. Put in command the one who, in your view, has the best proximity to Allah, to the Prophet, and to the Imam. وأنقاهم جيبا, and make sure that their heart has already been inclined towards them. وأفضلهم حلم ممن, and the highest one of them is the one who has forbearance against what? Against يبطئ عن الغضب, and they are slow to anger. They don't rush towards anger. They have this calmness in the face of anger. They are slow towards anger. But he says, but they are quick when there is dhulm. So they don't lose their temper, but when they see something wrong, they don't remain sitting down. He says, choose them. And these are the same people, he says, that with those who are da'if, they are calm. And with those who are aqwiya, amongst those of strength, they are strict. So the right soldier, the perfect soldier, is someone who the Imam says has a close to Allah, understands the Prophet and the words of the Imam, has a certain temperament, which they don't rush to anger. At the same time, they cannot stay still when they see dhulm. They treat two groups differently. Those who are min du'afa and those who are min aqwiya. Du'afa are those who are weak. With them, the Imam says, they should be kind. They should have karam with them. But with those who are rich or those who are strong and powerful, they must be strict with them. This is the temperament. He then says, when you're choosing who deserves to go in the army, look for certain things. Amongst them is ahlil bayutat salihah. Make sure you choose them from good houses. So the soldier must come from a certain situation of tarbiyah, either in their upbringing or their family is already close to this deen, but their house is what you look at when choosing. Look fi buyutikum, look in their houses. How are they? What are their parents like? What is their family like? What are the traditions like? Do they have wasawabiq al-ahsana? Do they follow decent traditions? Are they people of courage? Are they people of valor? Do they have generosity, benevolence? Look at these qualities. The Imam says the way that you look at the army should be the way that a parent looks at the child, the way that walidan look at wilda. He says, if you look at the army like this, the way a watchful parent looks at the development of a young child, then you will be able to understand your role to them. He says, don't, for example, he gives a few examples of how we treat our children. When you do something for your child, something good, do you keep reminding your children of how great I am that I did this for you again and again and again to make them feel guilty? No, the Imam says, so don't remind them and consider what you have done for them big. Similarly, if a child comes to you with something that they have made or some gift they have made, which is in itself not that great, but they are the one who's done it and you want to reward them, then you say, wow, this is the most amazing picture I've ever seen. Keep it up. Good work. MashaAllah, you are a great artist. They might not be a good artist, but we want to encourage them. The Imam says, consider what you do for them small and consider what little they do for you big. So when they come to you with their achievements, reward them, he says. Do not neglect to attend even their small matters. Don't just think that you're responsible for their big matters. Know the intricacies of their affairs. He says, because your small affairs, those amal which are saghir for you, will be of benefit to them, just like the big affairs you do, they cannot ignore. Then he says, this is the army. Amongst them, choose a commander. The commander should be the one that you have already made sure that his affairs have been dealt with. This is the commander of the army. This is the person who you have already taken care of his family, they have wealth, and you've taken care of his personal situation. So now he will turn his kindness back to you. And after he turns his kindness back to you, you will see fi qalubihim muhabba. You'll see love in his heart for you because of what you have done for him. And when he has this, he says, the most best favorite thing for a ruler is muhabbat fi ra'iyya. It is love fi qulub ra'iyya. It is love in the hearts of the subjects. You want this, I know you want this, Malik, that your people love you. But to get there, this only manifests when they have surrendered themselves to good commanders. So choose a good commander, choose a good hierarchical structure. Don't make them think their role is a burden for them, an ihsan on them. Don't keep watching them for when they will end their tenure. Continue to praise them and count their good deeds, because mentioning their good deeds rouses them and makes them strong and makes them motivated. And he says, if you want to encourage them specifically about this, mention to this verse of Quran, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, يا أيها الذين آمنوا أطيعوا الله وأطيعوا الرسول وأولي الأمر منكم فإن تنازعتم في شيء فردوا إلى الله ورسوله. Oh believers, worship Allah, follow the Prophet, and follow those in authority amongst yourselves. This is actually a proof of wilayat of Imam Ali alayhi salam. And when you have a quarrel, refer back to Allah and back to the Prophet if you believe in him. So go back to that hierarchy. Everyone has a system of rules and they must all follow the rules. This means that you must make sure you choose a commander who can rule the people, who can rule his army, and will go straight back to you. And then he ends by saying that refer back to Allah for his book, just like using this verse of Quran I have mentioned, Surah 4, verse 59. And remember, the high position of a man, the maqam of a person, should not make him think, or should not make you think that his deeds are small just because he's in authority. And neither should you think that someone who is low, their deeds are not big because they're in a low authority. I'll give you a really good example of this. If someone is powerful, if someone is rich, or if someone has some recognition in our eyes, they can do a small thing and we might think it's very big. They might, they might say a speech and we think it's amazing when it's not that great, but because of their maqam, we look at the person before the words. If there's a great sportsman and a very great professional person in their role, they might do a very ordinary goal or target or achievement. And we might say it's amazing, it's the best ever because it's them who's doing it. Similarly, if there's someone who's not got any rank or prestige, they've not got any authority, and they do something which is quite outstanding, how often do they go underrated just because they've not got fame? Maybe this happens with you guys, that you are trying hard at something and maybe you're not being recognized for it because you've not yet made it. Imam is saying that's not how to treat the army, where you reward one soldier because of his rank and debase the other because of his rank. Regard all of their deeds as equal. If you guys imagine for a moment what an army will look like who are actually following this, imagine the wafa in their hearts for the Imam, that he sees my actions, recognizes my leadership, is kind, and makes sure that all of my huquq are being respected. So this is the ma'yar, the standard in which the Imam treats the army. Okay, let me pause for a second. I know I said I wouldn't, but I am going to. Any quick questions or comments about the beauty in which the army has been constituted by the Imam? Anyone want to add anything or mention any questions or comments? If not, we'll keep going. Okay. We good? All right. The second group, the chief judge, the hakim. Now, the Imam says, ثم اختر الحكمة بين الناس أفضل رعية في نفسك. For the judge, choose the one who is the best of your people, the one who's going to judge amongst them. This is so important that they are the best. ممن لا تضيق به الأمور. They are not perplexed by the amr which come to them. They are not confused when they have to make a judgment. ولا تمحكم الخصوم. And when they get a dispute, they don't get upset. They are someone who does not insist on anything which is wrong. They don't hold any grudges. And they always make sure that they are close to haqq. And when they come to shubahat, when they come to doubt, when they come to an issue which they are not sure about, they pause. They don't give judgment. They don't assume to know anything. They are someone who is ready to stop at different hujjaj that they see, different arguments that they see. They consider them. They probe and are patient into matters. They are fearless when giving judgment. Praise does not make them vain. And elation, making them proud of them, does not make them lean to any individual who praises them. Ulaika qalil, the Imam says, such people are so few. You will not find people like this, that you praise them and they don't change, they don't shake. You encourage them and they don't become close to the one who's encouraged them. That when they don't know something, they stop and they ponder. And when they know something, they are resolute and firm. Imam says, Qalil, you don't find people like this. But he says, Thumma, after this, أَقْتَرُوا تَعَاهُدَ قَضَائِهِمْ. Make sure you then check his judgments. Be sure of them. Watch them. Make sure that they have enough wealth, enough money, that they don't need to be swayed by anyone. There's no occasion for them to go to others غيره, for their own needs. Give them that rank that no one else wants, because they are the judge of your community. So they'll be safe. He says, Malik, have a piercing eye on this matter. Be careful on this matter. Because the deen of Islam, he says, has formerly been a prisoner في يد الشقي, in the hands of the one who was vicious. And many actions were taken because of shahwat, and judges were administering based on dhulm. Malik, don't be like that, and don't appoint a judge like that. So the chief judge must be amongst the best of the people, because they are establishing the rule of law. There's a professor called Dr. Ijaz Hussain, and he comments on this, that Imam Ali believes in strengthening the judiciary and giving many rights to the rule of law. The rule of law is what? That when something is hukum, it's followed. This is something which comes from Nahjal Balagha, not from other systems specifically. Okay. So that's the judiciary. They have this role and they establish the law. As someone who is in the legal field, by the way, who's constantly reading judgments of judges and who is going for legal arguments, Imam is right, illa al-qalil. This is very rare to find a judge like this. That when you go to them with a disagreement, with an ikhtilaf, they have no grudge against the one who disagrees with them. They don't harbor it. And they don't content themselves, he says, with just a simple, basit understanding of an issue. They go further. That is rare as well. And this is why the chief judge has such an important role in the entire structure of government. Now, let's keep going. The next is ثُمَّ انْتَظَرُوا فِي عَمْرِ عُمَّالِكَ. The next people you need to look into is the executives. These are people, he says, who, very importantly, he says, فَاسْتَعْمِلْهُمْ أَخْتِبَارًا. give them role after testing them. So not anyone gets to just join the government like that. Test them, do imtihan of them, do ikhtibar for them, check them. After this, appoint them not based on muhabba or athra, not based on love or favoritism. Give them a different role based on their experience and modesty. Because if you choose them, the Imam says, from favoritism or from partiality, these things become dhulm in time. They become unfairness. That you just chose someone because of this. No, test them. Test the people who are representing different governments and departments. He says, go to those who are bayutun salih, those from the good houses, just like with the army, because the one in government is no necessarily less a soldier than the one on the battlefield. Choose someone, he says, who are not inclined ila al-shahawat wa habba dunya, who are not inclined towards love of this world and desires. They should have good character. And then they now become someone who represents you in government. He continues, give them an abundant livelihood. Alayhim arzaq. Make sure you give them rizq. Why? Same reason as before. If you give them strength to maintain themselves, then they'll be more careful in maintaining your funds. Because if the one who's responsible for issuing funds has no desire for them, he's trying to say, then there'll be no argument against them. They'll have no argument to disobey you. Or they can't use this argument against you. And they will not misappropriate your amana, your trust, because you have already remunerated them. Don't make them, Imam's not saying make them the richest people in the world, but give them enough that they don't have this temptation in them. Again, check their activities and make sure the people who report on them are also truthful and faithful. Are you seeing, my dear brothers and sisters, how the Imam system has so much accountability and transparency? That every person in a role has someone else watching them and reporting back to them. And he's saying, even those who are watching them must have certain qualities of truthfulness and kindness. Look at how this system is so integrated into fairness and adl. It's not just a word for the Imam, it's a standard for appointment. He says, but Malik, be careful of assistants. He says, if one of them extends his hands towards taking that which is not his, you should be harsh with them. Why? Because they represent the government. He says, alayhim unuqi, on their necks, you must make sure that there is make sure that on their necks there is punishment to recover what has been taken away. Place him in a maqam of dhillah, a place of disgrace. Blacklist him who misappropriates funds from inside the government, and make him wear the necklace of shame upon his neck for his offense. Make him ashamed for the one who's inside the government who's corrupt. So for the Imam, the judge, the chief in the army, and any individual representative of government all have this same quality, where there's someone else who is watching them. In the case of the judge, the Khalifa himself is watching them. But in the case of the army, it's the people who are accountable, and there's someone whose role it is to watch the chief, the head of the army. And in the case of the executive officers, you don't just leave them to represent for government. You keep watching them. Okay. Fourth, the Imam says, وَتَفَقَدْ أَمْرَ الْخَرَاجِ بِمَا يُصْلِحُ أَهْلَهُ. Watch the revenue and the people who manage it. وَأَهْل of kharaj, the money and the wealth and the tax. Make sure you watch the way money is coming and going from the government. Keep an eye on this, Malik. He says, crucially, other people cannot prosper without money and wealth being distributed in the ummah. No one will benefit. No one is winning unless there is wealth. So Malik, even you should keep an eye on the source of that money, which is the land, the arth. Maintain the cultivation of the land and watch it even closer than the collection of revenue. Why? Because there is no revenue without the cultivation of land. There's no wealth to be had without a place to get wealth from. One of the well-known economists of our, not our community, but someone who's worked well in our community is Professor Rodney Shakespeare. He says that one of the issues which lead to financial crises is this point, that we are more concerned with the collection of wealth than the production of wealth. For example, banks more than businesses, or collectors of tax more than givers of tax, producers of housing more than people who live in housing. Like, we always look at the second, not the first. And the truth is, revenue comes from the people, not from those who collect the revenue. Money in the ideal situation comes from work, not from banks. And this is his interpretation of this section, not mine. But what he's saying is, Malik, whoever asks for money without bringing you anything for that money ruins the area and brings maut ala nas, death to the people. And his rule that he has, وَيَسْتَقِيمَ أَمْرُ إِلَّا الْقَلِيلِ, his rule will not last for a long time, because his whole priority is collecting wealth and not the generation of wealth, the creation of wealth itself. That's the priority. And he says, Malik, if people complain to you about, if the people whose job is to collect revenue, they complain to you that there's too much to collect, or there is disease, or there is too much water in the land where we are going, or the condition of the land is too much due to flood or drought, then Malik, give them more revenue. Don't be harsher to them, be more lenient with them, because it will help and improve their position. Now, he says, because you've done one kindness for them, they will remember this and not have a grudge against you. So when the time comes that maybe the government needs more wealth from those who collect it, then you will find they are more inclined and more happy to be of assistance. Isn't this wise? Isn't this wise that if you're in a position of strength and you're collecting and collating resources in a government, and for some reason the one who collects revenue has an issue collecting it, don't blame them for the issue. Be kinder to them. Yani, give them concessions, alleviate their suffering, make them pay less to you, so that later when you're in trouble, for example, if you're going to war and you need more funds, or there's an issue with the public treasury, or whatever issue is, you remember them and you can depend on their strength, the Imam says, because you made an investment to them by catering to their convenience. And now you can have confidence in them that just by you extended karam to them, when circumstances change and you might have to ask for them for their assistance, they will happily bear it. Because the ruin of the land is caused by poverty and by those who are the cultivators. Some of them, they blame the poor, and the poor blame those who collect the money. Those who collect money blame those in power, who are only in power for short amounts of time and are corrupt. And those in corrupt do not appreciate from warning. Yani, it's a cycle. And the Imam is saying, to break this cycle of economic oppression, you must engage with those who collect money in a respectful way. When reading on this topic, I read that every half an hour, a farmer in India or China commits suicide every 30 minutes on average by consuming the very same pesticides they're inclined to put in the land, which is a very painful death. And the reason is because they are in so much debt, and the debt is increasing. This is just 2 countries, by the way. The problem is that they are in debt, and yet they're the ones who are producing value from the land. How can they be in debt? The priority is they produce goods and then sell it. And then it's in the sale of the goods produced that the one collects the money, brings it together, and goes back to the government. That's a system that should be working. Imam is saying, when the administration of revenue breaks, then there is poverty, and poverty is what ruins the land. Okay. That's the 4th point on the collection of revenue. The 5th point is the clerical establishment, yani those whose role it is to be the admin of the government. The Imam says, take care, فَلْيَنْظُرُوا فِي حَالِ الْكُتَّابِ. These are those people, kutabik, whose role is to be the secretarial workers. He says, فَوَلِّ عَلَىٰ أَمُورِكَ خَيْرُهُمْ. Make sure the ones who you give work to are the best amongst you, again, because they're in charge of your affairs. Give them your letters, give them the best, make sure they're the best character, and make sure they're the kind of people who are not elated by praising them. Again, the same quality happens. The Imam does not like it when your nafs takes control of your inclination towards adl. He should represent you in audiences and not speak against you, and neither should he be negligent in exchanging your communications from one person to another. These are the people who are basically doing the admin. They're getting news from one, giving news to the other, editing documents, this kind of, administrative clerical work. Even they have huquq. You can't just give anyone from them a role. They should make correct replies on behalf of matters of your receipts and your payments. They should not make any damaging agreements. They should not go against any aqd or ahd which you have made. And they should not fail in repudiating an agreement against you. Yani if someone has, if you are not, if I, yani the ruler, has not done some duty, they should call you out on it. They should not be ignorant of their own position, and they should not be ignorant of others' position. They should know what they believe for. Imam says, because if they don't know what they believe for, how can they know what others believe for? How often do we see ministers of governments, prime ministers, presidents, who don't even know the line of what they believe? They've not been briefed properly. They make mistakes. They don't know what they believe. They are asked a question in a press conference over their own policy, and they can't say it. If we're used to this level of hypocrisy in those political leaders of our time, imagine, the Imam is saying, if they don't know their own position, how can they be expected to have knowledge of the position of others? How can they? How can you believe your criticisms are being received by one who does not even know his own position on an issue? So select those who you have confidence in, a good impression, because people around you, they have affection towards these people. They are meeting these people. They are the ones who are virtuous. So make sure a decision is made amongst those on the ground who have renowned sidq am. The people around know they are truthful because they are a reflection of yourself. This idea is reflected more in Sermon 18, but we don't have time to go through it, in which the Imam touches on this issue more. Number 6 of the groups of government are those who are industrialists, those who are traders. The Imam says, ثم استويسي بالتجار, those who are in business, and those who are industrialists. Give them good counsel if they are settled in shops, if they are traders or physical laborers, because they are the ones who bring profit and have amal mufid. They have very useful amal and actions for you. Remember them. Whether they go to the land or the sea, plains or mountains, wherever they dare to go, do not fear revolt from them. Make sure that they do not have any fear of treason, because they are the ones who are extending the boundaries of your qawm. How many times do we see that there is a certain nationality in different countries, and it's not that they are political representatives, they're just business people. They have restaurants and shops in all over the world. There's a Chinatown in so many major Western cities. In some countries, there are more people from that country outside of the country than inside the country. And there is more wealth in private businesses of some nations outside than inside the actual country. Why? Because the business people are the ones who did hijrah, who did migration. They migrated for business. The Imam is saying, think of them. They're not even in your territory anymore, but they are part of your qawm. So look after their affairs. Protect them, bihadurikum. Make sure they are safe. Know them, that sometimes they can be narrow-minded, or they can only care about hoarding goods for profits and fixing prices and harm the people. Stop people from hoarding, because the Holy Prophet had prohibited. A sale should be smooth with correct mizan, correct weights, that you are not changing it to fool the people. No harm to either party, neither the seller nor the purchaser. Whoever commits hoarding after you prohibit it, there's a punishment on them. Why is the Imam against hoarding wealth and circulating wealth in amongst maybe the 1%? Because he believes in circulating wealth from the revenue collectors, from the business people, from the clerics, and from those who are poor, so that the Ummah has prosperity in the transference of wealth. All of it moving into everyone's hands based on their different huquq. And finally, we have the lowest class, those who the Imam says, number 7, ثم الله في التبعة السقلة من الدين, those who are لا حيلة لهم, they have no power amongst themselves, والمساكين والمحتاجين وأهل بؤس الزمن. These people are miskin, they are poor, La hila, they have no power for themselves. They have no wealth for themselves. These are the ones who maybe they are not celebrating society where they are enslaved or disabled or begging. He says those who beg, take care for them fi sabilillah, for the sake of Allah and his obligations towards him for which you have responsibility. For example, what can we do for those who are poor in our community? Fix for them a share fi bayt al-mal. Fix for them a very specific portion of the public treasury just for those who are poor. Share the crops of lands with them, taken as booty for the Muslim Ummah, a very specific percentage just for the poor. Make sure even those who are remote have the same as those who are near you, so those who are poor can be hidden and you cannot even see around you. They can be in council homes, they can be in tents, they can be in forests. We don't know where they are sometimes, but their huquq does not change based on their proximity to you. All these people's huquq are in your hands, Malik. Therefore, don't allow yourself to have such a luxurious life that you are kept away from them. You cannot be excused for ignoring even their small matters because you're working on their big matters. Don't think that. In the same way, don't be unmindful towards them. Don't turn your face away from them. Those who approach you, look at them not with contempt. Don't regard them as low. There's a hadith from Imam Rida alayhi salam, because this is the coming one, which he says that you should not look at the poor differently to how you look at the rich. Your nazar should be the same for both of them. The look in your eyes. Deal with them with a sense of responsibility on Allah and make sure that they are treated with equity under the rights given by Allah. So even if there's oppression in the land, even if there is dhulm in the land, and even if there's social inequality, that doesn't affect the huquq of Allah. So why does it affect the huquq of nas? It doesn't. Especially, Malik, those who are yatim, who are orphans, those who are older, those who are begging in front of you. This is a heavy right on you, and Allah lightens it upon you when you are truthful. And a part of being truthful is to fix a time in your day when you hear their complaints. Let them feel like they are being heard. This sounds so familiar to us. For I've heard the Prophet say, the people amongst you, amongst whom there is the weak, when their right is not secured from the strong, then if they don't have fear, they will never achieve purity. So make sure that amongst your community, you are paying specific attention to those who are poor. He says there are some things that you can't do yourself, Malik, like be available for them all the time. Make sure you have given certain secretaries and officers whose role it is just to hear complaints, so that if you will not hear them yourself, they will find you. And make sure that in your day, you are giving time to your own worship, just as you are giving time to hearing the complaints of others. Okay, let me quickly pause. That was a very brief summary of each of these groups, all of them with huquq, all of them with rights, and all of them working amongst one another. The executive officers must be relied upon by those who are doing the admin under them. And those who are doing admin, the clerical workers, must be there to listen to the words of those who are miskeen. And those who are miskeen must know they can speak to their Khalifa. And the one who's the Khalifa must be able to guide the words of the Hakim, of the judge. And the one who's the judge must make sure he's respecting the rights of all of the people. And the army must be part and from the houses of these people, which are the best of houses. Do you see how this entire community is so well integrated? This vision is so ideal, what we should be working towards. How great is that life? And how beautiful is the thing which we are striving towards? Okay, here I'll pause again and ask all of you, when you hear Imam Ali describe each of these different groups and their huquq, how do you feel as a Shia of Ali ibn Abi Talib, that all of these groups have their own rights? What are your views when listening and reading to this about what is the government of Imam Ali alayhi salam? What do we learn from this part of the letter? And by the way, it's this part which has become so famous around the world. In 2002, when they at the United Nations, when they celebrated it, they mentioned that the huquq, the rights that Imam Ali gives to these groups, was before when these rights were given by other governments and political systems. So again, I ask you, what do we as Shi'i learn from this part of Nahjal Balagha? Feel free to unmute or to comment your thoughts, inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam, Ali.
First of all, this segment especially was very insightful, and at certain times I found myself questioning the way I would treat my employees who are working with me in the team as an entrepreneur or as a startup owner.
Yeah.
And this is something that maybe I should have read before I would have like started a company. But now that I have come across this thing, I would be wary of these points that you had mentioned, and also do further research on it, because this actually helps me lead in a better way, in a more ethical way, and keep in mind what kind of people do I need to get on board and who would work with me. So yeah, really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Definitely, Ali, of course. I take it you own a business, or you are a manager in a business, right?
Yes.
So last week we looked at a narration from the Holy Prophet where he says that everyone is a ra'i and has a ra'iyya. Everyone is a leader and has and has his own subjects. And one of the examples was either you're in a family and there are those who respond to you, or you're in a business and there are those who respond to you in a business. The rights are the same, that you are the ra'i, that you are the one who is leading them. So we should, as individuals, embrace our leadership. And like you've mentioned quite beautifully, even when we don't, we can always learn what are the huquq and then treat them accordingly. There are some really good resources, by the way, for this for you, inshallah, if you're interested.
Definitely.
Shaykh Mutahari, who mentioned last week, has a section on this point of Adl from Nahjal Balagha. It's a section in his book called Glimpses of Nahjal Balagha. You can find it on alislam.org. There's a section on how to treat people according to this letter, inshallah. Also, there is a lecture series by Sheikh Shumali on Adl. And in one of the parts, he discusses the Adl of people to people. And if I'm not mistaken, there's a section there on people in business. So I urge you to look at that series, inshallah, and all the best for your responsibility, inshallah.
Definitely. Jazakallah.
Jazakumullah khair. Very beautiful point by Brother Ali. Inshallah, we can all learn from this reflection. Are there any other reflections anyone else would like to share on how you think you can learn from this segment from Nahjal Balagha?
I think Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
Can you hear me, by the way?
I can hear you. There's a child in the background, but I can hear you.
Yeah. Okay. So one of the biggest aspects of this lecture is the fact that, or this letter, is the fact, in my opinion, that it wasn't delivered. It was delivered to Malik Ashtar, but he didn't have the time to actually execute this because of his martyrdom. If we look at the hujjat of the Mahdi at the time, there will be this government in play. So when we look at ourselves, will we be facilitating that through this rhetoric? And if we do, can we be one of those judges or army personnel or people who are, or some may be miskeen, some may be, there is aspects that we have expectations and demands that we'll have to establish in ourselves to reach the full actualization of the Mahdi's government. And that's one of the things, if we all inculcate in our life, we can potentially speed up the Zuhur. And by reading this letter, it's very important to manifest that in ourselves. And I think one of the things that I've learned is that if you are starting a leadership, or if you are becoming a leader in something, or if you want to maintain a position in a government like Imam Mahdi's, read this letter, understand it, become familiar with it, know how you will have that ra'iyah, as you mentioned, and responsibility to others as you will to have to yourself. So this isn't a letter you just read for enjoyment. This is a letter that you inculcate in your life. And it's easy to just skim through it and just have a look to it, an enjoyment to it. But to really manifest it is something which takes time. And who knows, you could be a commander in the field of Imam Mahdi. Who knows?
Such a beautiful point. This is not some wah bah kind of letter that we, mashallah, it's a great point, and you move on. You're so right. You have to pause and you have to identify which of these responsibilities do I see potential in myself for. You're so right. And just like Ali mentioned before, you mentioned, echoed the same sentiment of making this practical. And let's make it even more practical. I mentioned 7 sections, right? If there was a khilaf of our Imam right now, there is definitely imamat of the Imam, but there's no khilafah in the political sense where there's a government which he's issuing orders. If there was now, where do I fit in? Could I be in the army? So the army, those qualities that they have, where they act upon adl, and there's a commander, alhamdulillah, and there's a commander amongst them, and they have a power structure, and they are from the best houses. Could I be like this? Okay. Could I be a judge? Am I fair? Am I someone who issues judgments fairly amongst myself, amongst my own people? If not, then let alone being a judge, I haven't done insaf as myself, as a member of the community. Okay. Do I right now work in either business, admin, management, any clerical role, anything which involves finances, collecting money or receiving money, or travel technically, or helping those who are poor directly or indirectly? If yes, these have been directly addressed in the sermon. Literally, those jobs have been mentioned in this letter. If you don't do one of those jobs, there are values which are discussed here, like not being elated by someone's praise, not being allowing your ego to get in the way of your adl when you treat people, and when you are in power, how you treat people. Like, these are universal values, and like you brothers have mentioned, we don't restrict this to living under the Imam in government. We do it now so we're ready for that time. We do it now so when that government comes, I have a role, because everyone has a role to play in there. Great points. There's a comment here by Sister Nadine. Assalamu alaikum salam. Is there a present day nation state that's modeled after these principles? Does it exist now? That's up to you. That's up to you. If you read this and you can look around the world and you can see a government which is actually embodying this. Maybe there are many who aspire to have this quality. I would. So the position of the ulama is different. Okay. Ayatollah Khamenei, for example, in one of his commentaries of Nahjal Balagha, writes that the reason why we're studying Nahjal Balagha is so that we can try to model our government over the government of Imam Ali alayhi salam, to embody these principles. He didn't say we have finished that task. That's what we want to do. Okay. That's a government trying. Any individual who is in power from amongst the Shi'i, if they're in a government which is not an Islamic government, can still use these as examples of how to govern themselves. And they themselves become the model of these principles. So I'll give you a very good example. When Shaykh Muhammad Baqir al-Sadr wrote his book Iqtisaduna, Our Economics, the government of Kuwait called him to Kuwait in order to ask him to advise on how they collect tax based on these principles. So Kuwait is not a system of Islamic government, but because of the work of Shahid al-Sadr in economics, they wanted to implement the policy of Imam Ali alayhi salam in their government. There's a sign of success, right? Wherever you see representatives of this qawm fulfill their responsibilities to Islam and then take positions of leadership, they should be following this advice and they become the model. But we don't have, to Sister Nadine and to others who are pondering on this point, what we don't have right now is a government of the Imam in which all of us have an active role. What we do have is a community of the Imam in which all of us have an active role, but we don't yet have that global government. That doesn't mean we don't have responsibilities. It means that there's a greater need to follow those responsibilities, because when the time comes for the dhuhr, either it came because we did this work, or once it came, we get to demonstrate the work that we have done. Like, it's one of those two things. logically. So I hope that helps demonstrate that we're not there yet. And every individual needs to follow these things to get there, inshallah. Okay. Sister Shaban has mentioned everything is interrelated and all based on adl. Exactly. Although it is very difficult to implement, but for smooth and peaceful community, it's needed. Yeah, like we're not going to implement this in a government in the UK or in America or Canada or Qatar. Neither are we saying that we should, because there's so many other considerations that go ahead. I can at least start with myself. I can start with my family and who is in my ra'iyah, in my business, and I can expand until I'm at least implement this in my community of Shi'i. So that at the very, very, very least, we have a system in our own internal community, which does have someone who arbitrates, protection for the others, a voice for the miskeen, food drives and charity projects. It does have administrators in the mosques and in the communities in general. I really think we should expand our mentality to more than just mosques as a place of worship or mosque as the only place where we can serve religion. There are so many ways to organize and become collective so that we can practically help each other. Let me give you one small example. The Al-Noor food drive, who I'm glad are supporting this book club. If you are part of this community, you've noticed that they are delivering food to members of our community who are suffering and don't even have food for that week. And some of them, the food drive is collecting food and taking it to their door, saying salam, smiling to them and giving them this food. Honestly, mosques don't do this normally. And that's because the function of a mosque is very specific. It's to establish worship in the mosque. But a much wider reading of Islam accepts my social responsibilities. And if there's people suffering in my qawm, and I'm telling you there are, then why have we not used the principles of this letter to organize for them before? Why is someone even poor in our own community when we have those who are so rich? Where is our own internal sharing of resources? And that's me thinking small of South London. Why don't I think bigger? What about London? What about the UK? What about Canada and America? What about the West in general? What about a global system in which we are so recognizing each other's huquq that when one person's in pain in Pakistan, I feel it in London? Like the Prophet says that this ummah is one organism, one body, that when one part is hurt, all of it feels pain. Why don't I feel pain like that, as if it's my family suffering? Why am I not watching the screens at those who are dying, saying Ali and Waliullah, and feeling that it's my own son and daughter being killed? Because I have not recognized that we are that one qawm. And I'm not doing insaf of them. And the advice of the Imam is, first do insaf of Allah to understand that you are a slave of God. Then you'll see who are the other slaves of God. Like, do you see the priority? Know that you are a worshipper of Allah. Who are the other worshippers? Know what truth is, and then you'll know the people of truth. So a little action for this point is we have to look upwards, inwards, and then outwards. We need to go internally first, and then things will become clear to us, inshallah. And that's what the Imam says to Malik is, Malik, make sure that you make time in your day to pray. You need that as your leader. Talk to Allah, have a communion with Him, and then you will understand how to arbitrate in the issues of the people. Okay, are there any final points or reflections of this letter? Any thoughts anyone wants to share how it felt reading or learning about it? Or any questions which is not clear so far? The letter goes on to discuss how the ruler should act with the rules, what the behavior should be of you, Malik. You know, how do you act? How do you spend your day? You know, it goes into a lot more detail, but we don't have time to go through all of it. And I encourage all of you to keep reading the letter. But were there any points you wanted to make or questions about the letter or anything that's been mentioned?
I would like to say one last point. Is
Yes,
there's a
brother.
social project which is easily made out of this. And I was considering about it, but it's basically where you kind of look at the letter and then you look at society today and you try and see the flaws in society and see how this government that Imam Ali has projected will do something that will improve that society and then build guidelines to do what Bakr al-Sadr did. But for this,
You just muted for a second. Did I freeze or did he mute? Can someone else help?
sorry, yeah, can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Yeah, so the isms in society are really, sorry, that's my daughter. The isms in society will be lost if we research this letter to the extent that you find out guidelines, and those guidelines can be looked at from a lens of the Western perspective by researching what's wrong with our current society and then filling in the
Definitely.
gaps in between. That is a project in itself, and it will guide a lot of people towards Islam to the extent that it will inspire a lot of people. And that's something that I would be quite interested in like going into, but it just needs that sort of extra effort with other people as well. And it's just an extension to people who would be interested as well. But that's a cause which can change the world if done properly, because then you open up the government in this country, and then you look at other resources around the world and other places, and then you can look at sort of corruption in Pakistan, or you look at injustices in Nigeria, and then you see how the analysis from all of those societies can bring towards what this letter is the ideal for, and then you see a model compared to the thing that's aspiring to that, and then you start building guidelines, and then those guidelines can inspire change. But that's a project which I think Imam Ali in the whole of Nahjal Balagha can inspire, not just a little snippet of what he can think about, but there's a Tazkiyah Nafs, there's other things about developing the soul, about the mind, about spirit, about God, and all of the things that Nahjal Balagha aspires to can be inscribed in our society. I think there's a hadith by Imam, the Prophet Muhammad, that says, Ali, your words are eternal, and the religion starts with your words and ends with your words. So this is how it will end if we take this seriously. And doing this book club amalgamates all of that confidence in me, at least, to say that there is people who are willing to put themselves out there to learn about the Nahjal Balagha the way it should be, and then transcribe it from a place of knowledge. So I do thank you for these weekly sessions, and I think that's something that I will continue to endeavor to achieve, to attend, to do that in the future. But thanks, Abbas. You've been great anyway.
Thank you so much for those very kind words. And crucially, like when this book club ends, that doesn't mean our individual reading of Nahjal Balagha ends. We keep going, inshallah. So we're going to end this book club in about 6 weeks, and then Muharram comes, and then maybe we'll restart it after. I'm not sure, inshallah, we'll see. But the whole point is, now is the time when I carry on internally. So the next 6 weeks, and for those of you, inshallah, who are have the pleasure to see in these sessions, we'll build a framework using our ulama's guidance. But then we go at it, inshallah, and we dive in our own time, and that's when we see how much do I really care about this book, inshallah. But thank you for your views. One thing I want to add to that point is, you're right, we have projects we should be doing, whether it's in politics or society or Western governments. Like, we have to be doing these things, and that requires specialists in these fields. So someone needs to know about law in order to look at legal reform using these words. Someone needs to know about politics and the governance of an individual municipality or council, or states, or they need to know about how does the Senate work in order to propose a policy which is inclined from these words. It's not enough for us as non-specialists to call that saying the world should follow Ali bin Abi Talib. Write a research paper, write a briefing paper, contact your MP, find out exactly what area you can contribute, and that requires specialists. To those of you who are young studying, that means you've got to study in fields where we are not represented and should be. For those of you who are parents, that means your children should be encouraged into fields where they can actually make value of these words. To those of you who have already qualified in these fields, that means keep going and find ways of implementing and teaching the words of the Imam. For those of you in other fields which are not directly related to this, find other ways in which you can contribute to those who are doing these things. Everyone's got a role. And like one of the sisters mentioned, there is a integration of everyone who's doing their responsibility. And I think the Imam wants this. The Imam wants us to communicate and to work together to find these solutions. And there is so much great work being done, but not enough. And the work that is being done is not always from our own tongues. People represent us who are not even from us sometimes. So that, of course, increases the urgency of the work that we have to do. Definitely. So thank you to the dear brother Shazad for your contributions and for this reminder and urgency. Alhamdulillah. Okay. Thank you to the listener who just wrote that comment as well. That's the end of today's book club. Now, technically, we have looked at Nahjal Balagha, we've looked at Tawheed, and we've looked at Adl. I think of the topics we should move on to Nabuwa, because this way we are going through the different usul, and developing a really strong framework of Islam, so that later on, after the book club is done, we have at least looked at the usul, the foundational principles in the religion of Islam from the words of Imam Ali alayhi salam. So we've looked at Tawheed. Today we've looked at Adl. Let's look at Nabuwa. Who is Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in the eyes of the one who knew him the most? For this reason, for next week, we're looking at Sermon 2 of Nahjal Balagha, in which there is a specific section on the Holy Prophet, on why he was chosen, how he was chosen, what his role is. And I encourage all of you, please read Sermon 2 of Nahjal Balagha for next week, inshallah. Have it open at least with you in the session. And crucially, let's not lose this very practical impulse we're having to find real life value. Let's carry it on. So when we look at the Prophet, let's think of ways that we can actually follow the example of the Holy Prophet today and answer the claims against the honesty and the sidq of the Prophet today. If someone writes a cartoon against the Prophet or draws a cartoon, if someone insults the Prophet, if someone's not following the Prophet, if someone's acting against him in the land which he taught, what is a wise way to react to it? We'll look at all of this next week. So thank you so much, all of you, inshallah. I will see you soon. Fi amanillah, ma'as-salam. Thank you again for your points. Next week at this time, inshallah, Wednesday at 7:30 UK time, let's look at Sermon 2 of Nahjul Balagha.